The 2023 Everest climbing season ended several months ago, yet there are still climbers who are missing on the tallest peak in the world. They are presumed to be dead, yet their bodies have not been found. This caps off the deadliest climbing season in the mountain's history, and even more controversies surround the peak, with little answers or solutions to the problems that climbers will continue to face in 2024 and beyond. But for 17 men and women, their lives are tragically over. This is their story. As 17 lives lost, 2023 has become Everest's deadliest year. While the 2015 earthquake took the lives of 19 to 21 individuals, they were not all on the peak. Thus, 2023 has taken that record. Climbing the tallest mountain in the world is safer than ever. So why are record deaths being recorded after 50 plus years of mountaineering? One of the biggest reasons, which I've covered extensively on this channel, is the record number of climbers not only on Everest, but other dangerous peaks such as K2. Nepal continues to issue more and more permits because tourism is the country's greatest revenue source, but the number of climbers is not the only reason we are seeing a rise in tragedies. Lack of regulation on the peak also plays a big part. Over the last several months, more details and accounts of the season are being released to the public. One of the biggest trends we are seeing is the lack of preparation and supplies further up on the mountain. Some chalk this up to inexperienced climbers and expedition teams, but the fact is, with no regulations on the peak, people will continue to do what benefits them, not others or the mountain, including leaving piles of trash scattered throughout the different camps. There are also several reports of a series of thefts at the South Col, with multiple companies including Adventure Consultants, Arnold Coaster Expeditions, Climbing 7 Summits, and Furtenbach Adventures reporting the theft of cooking gear, tents, and oxygen bottles. This is obviously concerning on many levels. But change will not happen quickly. Famous mountaineer and blogger Alan Arnett would state, without an apparent reason for the record deaths, changes will not come quickly if at all. Historically, changes that could reduce tourism revenue for the Nepal government or operators have been rejected. While there are many concerns and negatives stemming from the 2023 season, I do want to point out that growth is not necessarily a bad thing. It must be regulated and controlled to prevent accidents, but innovation is part of what makes us all human. The positives of advanced technology and communication would let Malaysian mountaineer Muhammad Hawari Hashim, a deaf-mute climber, take on Everest. We have covered a few stories regarding climbers with disabilities, and let me say from our experience that many struggle to accomplish their goal, but it's not impossible. Hawari is from a city in Malaysia called Kepala Batas, Penang. There he would hone his climbing skills, living a very active lifestyle from a young age, dreaming about climbing Mount Everest from as early as primary school. His mother would state he is actually someone who is always enthusiastic, confident, and active. He used to participate in all the sports and competitions at school. It is very obvious that while Hawari's disability was a part of who he was, he would not let it define him. In his young adult life, Hawari would begin to channel his love for outdoors and climbing into mountaineering, as he would summit mountains such as Mount Rinjani and Mount Tebing Keraton in Indonesia. He would also make the hike to Annapurna Base Camp in Nepal. Hawari would meet the love of his life, who was also hearing impaired in his home country, then becoming a father of 2 while working at the Penang Museum. What makes Hawari's story unique is the amount of support that he received from his country. He would be joining Pioneer Adventure, and those from home would nickname his expedition ME 2023 or Malaysia Everest 2023. In 2022, in preparation for his climb, there would be a ceremony where the chief minister would hand over the state flag to Hawari for motivation and a show of support. He would then state, "This is a huge challenge, and it is hoped the Malaysian team will make our country proud. However, it is important to stay safe and abide by the safety protocols throughout the journey." The chief minister would also make Hawari promise that after he returned, he would donate his climbing gear to the same museum he worked at to inspire individuals who suffered from disabilities and show that anything was possible. Along with a professional guide who understood sign language and could translate for Hawari, the 33-year-old would also be accompanied by 56 26-year-old Owang Askenbar Ampun Yaakob. I've covered Yaakob's story in another video, so be sure to check that out. The Malaysian team would begin their journey on April 1st, traveling to Nepal and eventually making their way to Everest's base camp. The entire expedition was expected to span just over 2 months, with the completion target date being June 11th, right before the summer temperatures hit the mountain, creating unsafe conditions. The South Col route on the mountain was crowded, but the conditions were cooperative with climbers, and Hawari was able to begin acclimatization trips shortly after they arrived at base camp. In fact, things were going very well. All expeditions were ahead of schedule, and with the news of a clear weather window in mid-May, well, it was looking like Hawari would get his chance to reach the summit. The South Col route was the only way up the mountain in 2023. Well, I shouldn't say only way, but the most reasonable way to the top. The other popular route up the northeast side of the mountain through Tibet has been closed since 2020, as China still has fears of many foreigners bringing COVID to their country. Some experts say this plays a part in the overcrowding on the South Col route, but with the northeast ridge being the more difficult climb, most inexperienced climbers would still try to climb the easier south side, and there is no expectation that this will change. Hawari would begin his final climb on May 15th. As part of a 4-man team, he would make his way through the Khumbu Icefall in the early hours of the morning, then proceed to climb up the South Col. The entire team of 4 climbers would reach the trash-ridden Camp 4, just under 8,000 meters. Camp 4 lies on the wind-swept saddle between Everest and Lhotse, and this is where Yaakob's journey would end, as Hawari would continue the climb towards the famous Hillary Steps with his guide and translator Shatar Man Rai. On May 18th at approximately 3:30 p.m., Hawari would stand on top of the world, with the Penang flag held to the sky between his arms. He would set a new record, being the first Malaysian deaf-mute mountaineer to summit the peak. News would spread quickly as the message they had made it to the summit would be transmitted over a walkie-talkie and then on to Hawari's family. His mother and wife would state that at the time, the news he had reached the top made them all very happy, although one of the biggest concerns was the time of day. For those familiar with Everest's summit, there is something called the 2 o'clock rule. This means that if a climber cannot reach the summit before 2 p.m., then they must turn around, as summiting later in the afternoon means you will have to descend the peak in the dark, further increasing the risk. Because of this rule, Hawari would take his picture, plant the flag of his home, and begin the descent down the peak. Thankfully, he would reach Camp 4 safely, and there he would rest before continuing his climb off the mountain. While Hawari was resting, one of his expedition members, Yaakob, who had stayed behind while Hawari made a trip to the summit, began to fall ill, causing all the Sherpas and guides to begin an emergency descent. This essentially left Hawari and all the other climbers in Camp 4 alone. So when Hawari began his climb a few hours later, he would start the descent by himself, and this would be the last time anyone saw the Malaysian climber. That same day, May 19th, Hawari would be reported missing. This wasn't an uncommon occurrence in 2023, as rescue helicopters had practically been on Everest almost every day of the climbing season. Rescue efforts would begin by checking every tent at all the camps, but after Pioneer Adventure saw no sign of the young climber, reality began to set in. What made rescue efforts worse is there was an entire mountain to search, as Hawari had disappeared somewhere between Camp 4 and base camp. Hawari's mother, Che Tom, and his wife were shocked to hear the news that their son and husband was missing, but they remained hopeful that he would return home, as there was an entire country praying for his safety and well-being. The stories of how the Penang community and political figures came together around the news that Hawari was missing are truly touching, and a great representation of how we can all come together in tough times. A communal gathering for prayers would take place, as everyone remained hopeful. There would be little information or news that would make its way to Hawari's family, as there really was nothing to report. Rescuers would search crevasses, common fall zones, and every inch of all the camps, but soon days would go by, then weeks, and now months, with no sign of the young climber. While Hawari would not be officially confirmed deceased because there was no sign of his body, there is realistically no way for him to survive on the peak. Hawari would be marked as the 17th death of the climbing season, marking it the deadliest in the mountain's history. The amount of tragedy in 2023 is overwhelming, but with little to no change expected from the Nepali government, it is hard to believe that this trend will not continue in years to come. We can only pray for climbers already preparing for the 2024 season.